Jack Holloway had a special talent, not the kind of talent you put on resumes or brag about at family gatherings. Jack's particular gift was breaking things specifically, breaking things while attempting to fix them. He called it creative destruction. His former employers called it grounds for immediate termination. It wasn't that Jack wasn't smart. He was, probably too smart for his own good. The problem was that Jack's brain operated on what he liked to call intuitive engineering, which roughly translated to what happens if I try this, usually followed by sparks, smoke, and hasty apologies. Jack was currently between jobs, which was a polite way of saying he'd been fired from his position at the lunar maintenance facility after he'd attempted to optimize the oxygen recycling system and somehow managed to make it produce helium instead. No one died, but for 3 days, everyone on the base sounded like they'd been huffing party balloons. Management didn't see the humor in it. So when the sleek black government vehicle pulled up outside his apartment on that rainy Tuesday morning, Jack assumed they were finally arresting him for that incident with the Mars rover prototype. He was prepared to explain, again, that the rover would have been fine if the test track hadn't been so close to that cliff. Instead, a woman in a crisp blue uniform that screamed, "I've got more security clearance than you'll ever have," stepped out and fixed him with a gaze that could have cut diamonds. Jack Holloway? Depends who's asking, Jack replied, trying to sound mysterious and failing miserably. I'm Admiral Rodriguez, Earth representative to the Galactic Alliance. I need you to come with me immediately. Jack blinked. The what now? And the Galactic Alliance. The cooperative federation of 47 advanced spacefaring civilizations that Earth joined 8 months ago. Oh, right. Jack nodded, vaguely recalling something about that between celebrity gossip updates. First contact had been surprisingly anticlimactic. Turns out aliens had been waiting for humans to discover a specific communication frequency before saying hello. When we finally did, they sent their equivalent of a fruit basket and an application form. And you need me because we have a situation that requires your particular expertise. Jack snorted. My expertise is getting fired from maintenance jobs. Exactly, Rodriguez said without a hint of irony. The Alliance has built the most sophisticated weapon system in the known universe. It's called the Nexus Annihilator. It took the combined genius of 47 species 12 years to design and build. And now it's broken. And none of those geniuses can fix it? That's correct. Their engineers are stumped. So you want me, the guy who once set fire to a waterproof life pod, to look at alien super technology that the galaxy's brightest minds can't figure out? Sometimes the solution requires a different perspective. A perspective that specializes in breaking things, and a human perspective. Jack considered this for approximately 2 seconds before shrugging. When do we leave? Now, Rodriguez said, checking her watch. The shuttle leaves in 20 minutes. Shuttle? Like to space? I should probably pack. Everything you need will be provided. As they drove toward the spaceport, Jack stared out the window at the rainy Seattle morning, wondering if this was a terrible mistake or the greatest opportunity of his life. Probably both, knowing his luck. 3 hours later, Jack found himself on a ship leaving Earth's atmosphere, headed toward a classified rendezvous point with what Rodriguez called the Alliance flagship. The shuttle itself was clearly alien technology, moving with an eerie smoothness that made Jack's stomach uncertain about which way was up. So, Jack said, trying to fill the awkward silence, this Nexus Annihilator. What does it annihilate exactly? Rodriguez's expression could have frozen nitrogen. That's classified. But I'm going to be fixing it, right? Shouldn't I know what it does? You'll be briefed on a need-to-know basis. Does it, like, blow up planets? Because I feel like I should know if I'm fixing a planet killer. Rodriguez sighed the sigh of someone who was already regretting their life choices. It's not a planet killer, Holloway. It's a defensive system. Beyond that, you'll be informed when we arrive. Jack nodded, pretending to understand, which was a skill he'd perfected over years of being thoroughly confused by life in general. Got it. Super-secret alien death machine. No questions asked. As the shuttle accelerated to speeds that made Jack's conception of physics whimper in the corner, he wondered idly if his unique talent for catastrophic maintenance failures was about to be applied on a galactic scale. If so, the universe was in for quite a show. The Alliance flagship, it turned out, was less of a ship and more of a mobile city, a massive structure the size of Manhattan that gleamed like polished chrome under the light of unfamiliar stars. As their shuttle approached, Jack's face was practically glued to the viewport, his eyes wide with childlike wonder. "Holy shit," he whispered. "That's not a ship. That's a small moon." Language, Holloway, Rodriguez chided, though she couldn't completely hide her own pride. And it's actually a Class 7 intersection hub. The Nexus Annihilator is housed in the central spire. Jack squinted at the enormous needle-like structure rising from the center of the hub. That thing is big enough to house a weapon that can annihilate whatever it annihilates. The weapon itself isn't particularly large. Most of that space is for the support systems, power generation, and containment protocols. Containment? Is this thing radioactive? Because I should probably mention, I'm not certified for rad work. It's not radioactive, Rodriguez interrupted. At least, not in any way you'd understand. That wasn't remotely reassuring, but before Jack could press for details, their shuttle was docking with the hub. The airlock cycled with a series of hisses and clicks, and then they were stepping into a cavernous hangar bay populated by the most diverse collection of beings Jack had ever seen. Some were vaguely humanoid, others decidedly not. There were creatures floating in bubbling tanks, entities that seemed to be made of shifting geometric patterns, and one being that appeared to be a sentient cloud of glittering particles. Jack tried not to stare, failed, and settled for trying not to look completely terrified. The Alliance encompasses many forms of life, Rodriguez explained, noticing his wide-eyed gawking. Some species evolved in environments you'd find impossible to comprehend, let alone survive in. "Cool," Jack squeaked, his voice an octave higher than normal. They were met by a trio of aliens that had clearly been waiting for their arrival. The first was tall and insectoid, with a carapace the color of burnished copper and 4 arms that moved with unsettling precision. The second was short and stocky, with pale blue skin and what appeared to be cables, or perhaps tentacles, sprouting from where hair would be on a human. The third was roughly human-sized but covered in shimmering scales that changed color like oil on water. Admiral Rodriguez, the insectoid being, said, its mandibles clicking rhythmically. "You've returned with the human technician. Excellent. Excellent." "Commander Vrix," Rodriguez nodded respectfully. "May I present Jack Holloway, the specialist I mentioned?" Jack gave an awkward half-wave. "Hi there." Commander Vrix's compound eyes swiveled to examine Jack with uncomfortable intensity. "This is the human with the unique approach to mechanical systems?" "That's one way to put it," Jack muttered. The blue-skinned alien stepped forward, the cable-like appendages on its head writhing nervously. "Does it understand the gravity of our situation? Benishes. The catastrophic implications? The impending doom that hangs over us like the sword of Damocles?" "Chemicals," Jack corrected automatically. "What? The sword of Damocles? Not Damocles. It's from Greek mythology." The blue alien blinked several pairs of eyes in rapid succession. "Irrelevant. The Nexus Annihilator remains non-functional while we waste time discussing primitive Earth legends." "Technician Plex," Rodriguez said soothingly, "I assure you Mr. Holloway understands the urgency of the situation." Jack, who absolutely did not understand the urgency of any situation beyond his next meal, nodded solemnly. The third alien, the one with the shimmering scales, moved forward with a fluid grace. When it spoke, its voice was melodious, almost hypnotic. "We extend our most profound gratitude and humble appreciation for your expeditious journey across the vast cosmic expanse to lend your unique human perspective to our technological conundrum. Mr. Holloway, your species' reputation for unorthodox problem-solving approaches has preceded you like the gentle glow of a newborn star." Jack stared blankly. "Thanks. This is Diplomat Miska, Rodriguez explained. They serve as the cultural liaison between Earth and the Alliance. Charmed, Jack said, then turned back to Rodriguez. So, about this broken super weapon. The Commander Vrix's mandibles clicked in what might have been annoyance. You follow us. You will be briefed on the Nexus Annihilator and the nature of its malfunction. Time is of the essence. As they moved through corridors that seemed to defy conventional geometry, Jack tried to memorize the route, but quickly gave up. This place was a maze, and he had the directional sense of a concussed hamster on its best days. The briefing room was a circular chamber with what appeared to be a holographic display in the center. As they entered, the display flickered to life, showing a rotating model of a device that looked like a cross between a lotus flower and a particle accelerator. This, Commander Vrix announced, is the Nexus Annihilator, the most sophisticated defensive system ever created. Jack leaned forward, genuinely curious, and what exactly does it defend against? The three aliens exchanged glances that even Jack, with his limited understanding of alien facial expressions, could interpret as "oh crap." That information, Commander Vrix said stiffly, is not relevant to the repair process. Kinda feels relevant, Jack countered. Like if I'm working on a fire suppression system, I'd want to know if it's supposed to put out grease fires or electrical fires, you know? The Nexus Annihilator protects against extinction-level threats, Technician Plex blurted, his head cables writhing more vigorously. That's all you need to know. What he means to say, Diplomat Miska interjected smoothly, is that the specific operational parameters of the device involve certain security classifications that would unnecessarily complicate your task, which is simply to restore functionality to the mechanical systems. Jack looked at Rodriguez, who gave him a slight nod that clearly meant just go with it. All right, Jack sighed. So it's broken. What exactly is it doing or not doing? Technician Plex launched into a technical explanation that might as well have been in another language. Actually, parts of it were in another language, as the translation technology occasionally struggled with highly specialized terminology. Jack nodded politely, understanding perhaps one word in 20, and his expression growing increasingly blank as Plex rambled about quantum entanglement matrices and dimensional folding arrays and something called pseudo-temporal phase locking that sounded like complete gibberish. And that's why the primary activation sequence fails to initiate the cascading resonance pattern, Plex finally concluded, looking at Jack expectantly. Right, Jack said slowly. So it won't turn on. Plex's eye stalks drooped in what might have been exasperation. That is a gross oversimplification of, but essentially correct, Commander Vrix interrupted. The Nexus Annihilator will not turn on, as you put it. Jack rubbed his chin thoughtfully, trying to look like someone who had any idea what he was doing. Well, I'll need to see it in person. Sometimes these things are simpler than they seem. The look Technician Plex gave him suggested that nothing about this situation was simple. But Commander Vrix was already leading them out of the briefing room toward what would undoubtedly be the strangest maintenance job of Jack's life. The chamber housing the Nexus Annihilator was enormous, a vast dome at least 500 meters across. The device itself sat in the center like a mechanical lotus flower, its petals or whatever they were folded inward in what Jack assumed was its inactive state. Around it, alien technicians from dozens of species scurried about, checking readings, adjusting settings, and generally looking very important and busy. Wow, Jack said eloquently. Indeed, Commander Vrix agreed. You are looking at the pinnacle of galactic achievement. 47 civilizations contributed their most advanced technologies to create this. And nobody thought to include an instruction manual. Technician Plex made a sound like a tea kettle reaching boiling point. There are over 4,000 technical documents detailing every aspect of the Nexus Annihilator's operation. The problem isn't a lack of documentation, it's that the system is behaving in ways that contradict our understanding of fundamental physics. Oh, Jack said. That does sound like a problem. Diplomat Miska placed a scaled hand on Jack's shoulder. Perhaps our esteemed human colleague would benefit from a practical demonstration of the device's current operational status, rather than a theoretical discussion of its multitudinous complexities. Jack pointed at Miska. What they said. Commander Vrix clicked his mandibles in what might have been the insectoid equivalent of a sigh. Very well. Technician Plex, initiate a startup sequence for Mr. Holloway's benefit. Plex scuttled over to a control panel and began manipulating symbols that seemed to float above its surface. The giant Lotus device hummed to life, its petals beginning to unfold with a grace that belied their massive size. Lights flickered across its surface in patterns that hurt Jack's eyes if he looked at them too long. The initialization phase is proceeding normally, Plex narrated. Now approaching the primary activation threshold, and the humming grew louder, the petals unfolded further, and then nothing. The device froze, half open, and a series of angry red symbols appeared on every control panel in the room. This, Plex said with obvious frustration, is as far as we can get. The system refuses to progress beyond this point. Jack approached the device, circling it slowly. From certain angles, parts of it seemed to not quite be there, as if they existed partially in another dimension, which, given the technobabble he'd heard earlier, might actually be the case. Have you tried turning it off and on again? Jack asked. Only half joking. The look Plex gave him could have curdled milk. We have performed 16 complete power cycling procedures. The result is always the same. Right. Jack nodded. Just checking, basic troubleshooting and all that. He continued his circuit of the device, occasionally stopping to peer at particularly interesting components. Not that he understood what any of them did, but he figured looking thoughtful couldn't hurt. So, he said after a while, what exactly happens when this thing is working properly? Not what it does to whatever it's defending against, just what does it look like when it's on? The Commander Vrix and Technician Plex exchanged glances. The fully activated Nexus Annihilator opens completely, Commander Vrix explained. All petals extend to their maximum position, and the central core generates a specific energy signature that is then amplified and directed by the petals. Like a flower blooming, Jack mused, or maybe more like a satellite dish focusing a signal. An imperfect analogy, but not entirely incorrect, Briggs conceded. Jack approached one of the control panels, careful not to touch anything. And these symbols, what do they mean? Plex launched into another technical explanation that Jack immediately tuned out. Instead, he studied the panel itself, noticing the way some symbols pulsed while others remained static. There was a pattern there, but he couldn't quite grasp it. Could I have a moment alone with it? Jack interrupted. Plex's explanation ground to a halt. Alone? With the Nexus Annihilator? Absolutely not. The potential for catastrophic. 10 minutes, Jack insisted. Sometimes I think better without distractions. Commander Vrix considered this. The device is currently inert. I see no harm in allowing Mr. Holloway a brief period of uninterrupted observation. But Commander Plex began. 10 minutes, Vrix decided. We will withdraw to the observation gallery. Mr. Holloway, do not touch any controls without authorization. I wouldn't dream of it, Jack lied smoothly. The aliens filed out, with Plex casting nervous glances back every few steps. When they were gone, Jack immediately approached the nearest control panel. Okay, let's see what we've got here, he muttered to himself. The symbols were completely alien, but the layout reminded him of flow diagrams he'd seen in power distribution systems. If he was right, and that was a big if, then this panel controlled energy routing to the petals. I wonder, he mused, reaching out toward a pulsing blue symbol that seemed to be connected to multiple pathways. What happens if I just... His finger touched the symbol, which flashed brightly at the contact. Instantly, the entire device shuddered, and one of the petals suddenly extended fully with a sound like tearing metal. Oops, Jack whispered, yanking his hand back. Alarms began blaring throughout the chamber, and the observation gallery erupted with activity. Before Jack could do anything else, the doors burst open, and a flood of aliens rushed in, with Commander Vrix, Technician Plex, and Diplomat Miska in the lead. What did you do? Plex shrieked, his head cables practically tied in knots with distress. Nothing. Jack protested automatically. I was just looking and it did that. He gestured at the fully extended petal, which was now vibrating slightly. Impossible, one of the other alien technicians said. We've been trying to achieve petal extension for weeks without success. Commander Rix studied Jack with his compound eyes. Interesting. The human's presence has triggered a response we could not achieve through conventional methods. It wasn't my presence, Jack admitted. I might have touched one of the symbols, that blue pulsing one, right there. Plex looked like he might faint. You touched the control interface. After we explicitly instructed you not to? In my defense, Jack said, I'm really bad at following instructions. It's kind of my thing. To everyone's surprise, Commander Vrix made a sound that might have been laughter. And chaos factor. Perhaps this is precisely what we needed. And just like that, Jack Holloway, professional disaster, became known to the Galactic Alliance as the Human Wrecker, a title that would prove prophetic in ways none of them could imagine. The next 3 days were a blur of increasingly desperate attempts to understand the Nexus Annihilator's malfunction. Jack had been given temporary quarters on the station, though quarters was a generous term for what was essentially a glorified closet adapted to human physiology. The bed was too short. The atmospheric settings made his sinuses feel like they were stuffed with cotton, and the less said about the toilet-like apparatus, the better. But the real challenge was the Annihilator itself. After his initial success with extending a single petal, the Alliance scientists had developed a new theory. Perhaps human bioelectrical fields interacted with the device in unexpected ways. This led to Jack spending hours standing in various positions around the machine, while instruments recorded data that meant nothing to him. I feel like a lab rat, he complained to Rodriguez during one of their brief meetings. You're making progress, she assured him. That's more than anyone else has accomplished. By accident. I have no idea what I'm doing. Sometimes that's exactly what's needed. Now, they want you back in the chamber. Apparently they have a new testing protocol. It's a menpies out to pull. The new protocol, it turned out, involved Jack touching different parts of the control system under Plex's nervous supervision. After his unauthorized success, they'd decided to harness his human chaos factor in a controlled manner. Now touch the third symbol from the left, Plex instructed, hovering anxiously at Jack's side. Gently. Jack pressed the indicated symbol, which flared red and then faded to a dull grey. Nothing happened to the Annihilator. Next, the circular pattern at the top of the sequence, Plex directed. Jack complied, with similar results. This went on for hours, with Jack pressing symbols in various sequences while the assembled alien scientists recorded the results and argued among themselves in languages his translator couldn't fully decipher. Finally, frustrated and bored, Jack stopped following Plex's instructions and simply pressed a random sequence of symbols that, to his eye, informed a pattern similar to a circuit diagram. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The entire Nexus Annihilator shuddered violently, and 3 more petals suddenly extended to their full position. The central core began to glow with a light that seemed to shift between colors that Jack had no names for. What did you do? Plex shrieked, not for the first or last time. I have no idea, Jack admitted. I just pressed the symbols that looked like they went together. Looked like they went together? Plex repeated incredulously. That's not a valid protocol. You can't just press controls based on aesthetic preference. Well, it worked, didn't it? Jack gestured at the now partially opened Annihilator. Commander Vrix, who had been observing from a distance, approached the control panel. Explain your reasoning, Mr. Holloway. What pattern did you perceive? Jack scratched his head. It looked like a circuit diagram, kind of. Like these symbols here represent power flow, and these others are like, I don't know, capacitors or something. So I figured if I activated them in sequence, it might complete the circuit. The alien scientists exchanged glances. That's not how the control system is designed to work, one of them said slowly. But it did work, Commander Vrix pointed out. 4 petals are now fully extended. That's 4 more than we had achieved before Mr. Holloway's intervention. Over the next 2 days, Jack continued his unorthodox approach to repairing the Nexus Annihilator. Each success was followed by frantic documentation by the alien scientists, who seemed increasingly baffled by his methods. "I don't understand," Plex complained after Jack had managed to activate 2 more petals by essentially drumming his fingers across the control panel in a rhythm that matched an old Earth pop song. "Liam, there's no logical pattern to your actions." "Sure there is," Jack shrugged. "It's just not your logic." "Yup." This comment led to an hour-long philosophical debate among the aliens about the nature of logic itself, during which Jack wandered off to examine other parts of the chamber. He'd been secretly collecting observations that troubled him. Small discrepancies in the control systems, irregularities in the power distribution network, subtle alterations to some of the components that didn't match the holographic model he'd been shown. Individually, each discrepancy could be explained away as a minor variation or adaptation. But together they formed a pattern that Jack recognized from his years of maintenance work: deliberate sabotage disguised as routine adjustments. Someone had intentionally disabled the Nexus Annihilator. The question was who and why. As Jack continued his seemingly random but increasingly successful manipulations of the device, he kept his suspicions to himself, watching the alien staff for clues. Most seemed genuinely invested in repairing the Annihilator. But occasionally he caught glimpses of what might have been concern when the device showed signs of reactivating. It was during one such moment that he noticed Diplomat Miska lingering near a secondary control panel, their scales shifting to a deep indigo color that Jack hadn't seen before. When Miska realized Jack was watching, the scales immediately rippled back to their usual iridescent pattern. "Fascinating progress you're making, esteemed human colleague," Miska said smoothly. "Your species' unique approach continues to yield unexpected results that defy conventional methodologies employed by our most brilliant minds." "Thanks," Jack replied casually. "Just doing what comes naturally, breaking things to fix them, you know." "Indeed," Miska nodded. "A most unconventional philosophy, yet undeniably effective in this particular circumstance." Jack decided to test a theory. "You know, I think I'm starting to understand how this thing works. The way the power flows through those conduits there, it's actually pretty similar to Earth technology, just more advanced." It wasn't similar at all, but Jack watched carefully as Miska's scales rippled with what might have been alarm. "Is that so? How fascinating that such disparate evolutionary paths would converge on similar technological solutions." "Yeah," Jack continued, pressing his advantage. "In fact, I think I've figured out the main problem. Someone's rerouted the power distribution system, right, probably by accident during maintenance." The color change in Miska's scales was unmistakable this time, a rapid shift to a deep crimson before stabilizing again. "What an astute observation," Miska said, their voice perfectly controlled despite the momentary color change. "Have you shared this insight with Technician Plex?" "Not yet," Jack replied. "I wanted to be sure first. Maybe you'd like to take a look, since you're here anyway." "Regrettably, I must decline. My expertise lies in diplomatic matters, not technical ones. I would offer little value to your assessment." "You'll..." "Right, of course," Jack nodded, watching as Miska made a graceful but hasty exit from the chamber. Jack had found his saboteur. The question now was what to do about it. Jack spent the next day pretending to continue his random approaches to fixing the Nexus Annihilator, while actually implementing a plan to catch Miska in the act. He'd convinced Plex to give him access to the maintenance logs, claiming he needed to understand the device's normal operation parameters. The logs confirmed his suspicions. Subtle changes had been made to the system configuration, always during Miska's diplomatic tours of the facility. Now he just needed proof, and an opportunity to confront the diplomat without alerting the entire station. That opportunity came sooner than expected. Jack had been working late, after most of the other technicians had retired for the night cycle. He was alone in the chamber with the partially activated Annihilator, supposedly running diagnostics, but actually setting a trap. He'd deliberately misconfigured one of the control panels to indicate a power surge in a section he knew Miska had previously tampered with. Sure enough, Less than an hour later, the chamber door slid open silently, and diplomat Miska glided in, their scales set to a dark, camouflage-like pattern that blended with the shadows. Jack remained hidden behind one of the massive petals, watching as Miska approached the control panel and began manipulating the symbols with a speed and a precision that betrayed considerable technical knowledge, far more than a mere diplomatic liaison should possess. "You know," Jack said conversationally, stepping out from his hiding place, "for someone with no technical expertise, you're pretty good at reprogramming alien superweapons." Miska's scales flashed bright yellow in surprise before settling into a calm blue. "Mr. Holloway, your presence is unexpected at this hour. I could say the same about you. Doing a little midnight maintenance? Really observing. The Nexus Annihilator is a marvel of galactic engineering. I find it soothing to contemplate during quiet hours." Jack nodded. "And I suppose you find it especially soothing to rewire the power distribution system when no one's looking?" The diplomat's scales shifted through several colors in rapid succession before settling on a deep, resolute purple. "I see we've reached an impasse." "Not necessarily," Jack said, approaching slowly. "I'm just trying to understand why you're sabotaging the most important weapon in the galaxy. Seems like a career-limiting move for a diplomat." Miska regarded Jack with unblinking eyes. "You are more perceptive than your species is given credit for. I've been told I have a talent for breaking things. It helps me recognize when someone else is doing it deliberately." The diplomat seemed to come to a decision. "What I am about to tell you violates multiple Alliance security protocols. But perhaps a human perspective is precisely what this situation requires." "I'm all ears." "The Nexus Annihilator," Miska began, their voice dropping to a near whisper, "is not merely a defensive weapon as you've been told. It is capable of manipulating the fundamental forces that bind reality together." Jack blinked. "That sounds not good." "Indeed. At full capacity, it could theoretically destabilize the fabric of space-time itself. The potential for catastrophic misuse is incalculable. And let me guess, you're part of some faction that thinks that's a bad idea." Miska's scales rippled in what might have been the equivalent of a grim smile. "The Harmony Collective. We believe that weapons of such magnitude should not exist, regardless of the noble intentions behind their creation." "So you've been sabotaging it to keep it from ever being used?" "Precisely. I had successfully maintained its non-operational status until your arrival. Your unorthodox methods have proven unexpectedly effective at bypassing my safeguards." Jack ran a hand through his hair, processing this information. "Why not just speak out against it? You're a diplomat, right? Isn't that your job?" "The Alliance Council voted unanimously to create the Nexus Annihilator. Those who openly opposed it were reassigned to distant outposts. Diplomatic channels proved ineffective, so more direct action became necessary." Before Jack could respond, the chamber door slid open again, and Commander Vrix entered, flanked by security drones. "I see our suspicions were correct," Vrix said, his mandibles clicking ominously. "Diplomat Miska, you are charged with sabotage and treason against the Alliance." Miska's scales darkened to a deep, defiant crimson. "I accept the consequences of my actions, Commander, but I maintain that the Nexus Annihilator represents a greater threat to our civilizations than any external enemy." "That is not for you to decide," Vrix replied coldly. He turned to Jack. "Mr. Holloway, it seems we owe you a debt of gratitude. Your unusual methods not only helped repair the Annihilator, but also exposed a traitor in our midst." Jack looked between the commander and the diplomat, suddenly uncomfortable with the role he'd played. "Hold on. Maybe we should talk about this, if what Miska says is true." "What Miska says is irrelevant," Vrix interrupted. "The Nexus Annihilator is the cornerstone of Alliance security. Its operational status is non-negotiable." As the security drones moved to apprehend Miska, Jack found himself caught in a moral dilemma he hadn't anticipated. On one hand, Miska had committed sabotage and lied about their identity. On the other hand, a weapon that could destabilize the fabric of space-time seemed like something that maybe shouldn't exist. And now Jack, with his talent for breaking things, had accidentally helped fix the most dangerous device in the galaxy. The irony wasn't lost on him. As Miska was led away, their scales shifted to a deep, sorrowful blue, and they gave Jack one last meaningful look. The message was clear. You now understand the stakes. What will you do about it? Jack spent a restless night in his too small alien bed, turning over the problem in his mind. By morning he'd come to a decision that was either brilliantly simple or catastrophically stupid, but possibly both. When he arrived at the chamber housing the Nexus Annihilator, he found it buzzing with activity. News of Miska's arrest had spread, and the full technical team was present, eager to complete the repairs now that the saboteur had been identified. "Ah, Mr. Holloway." Commander Vrix greeted him. "Excellent timing. We believe we've identified all of diplomat Miska's alterations to the system. With your assistance, we should be able to achieve full activation today." "Great," Jack said with forced enthusiasm. "Can't wait to see this baby in action." Technician Plex scuttled over, his head cables practically vibrating with excitement. "We've compiled all your successful interaction patterns into a systematic protocol. Your human chaos has been quantified and replicated." "That's impressive," Jack managed, wondering if that statement was as ominous as it sounded. For the next several hours, Jack worked alongside the alien technicians, following their instructions while secretly implementing his own plan. His unique position as the human chaos factor gave him a certain latitude that the regimented Voraxians would never consider questioning. Each time they turned to confer about a calibration or cross-check their readings, Jack made tiny, almost imperceptible adjustments to the system. "We're approaching full integration," announced Commander Vrix, studying the holographic displays hovering above the central console. "Energy throughput is stabilizing at 92%. Jack nodded, wiping sweat from his brow. "Just a few more calibrations on the human interface side." Technician Plex hovered near Jack's shoulder, head cables twitching with each keystroke. "Fascinating. Your input patterns continue to defy our predictive algorithms. Are all humans this inconsistent?" "Pretty much," Jack replied with a shrug. "It's kind of our specialty." As the day progressed, the chamber grew more crowded. High-ranking Voraxian officials filed in to witness the historic activation. Jack spotted Admiral Zorn among them, flanked by security officers. The Admiral's compound eyes fixed on Jack with unmistakable suspicion. "Final systems check," Commander Vrix announced. "All stations report." The technicians called out their readiness one by one. Jack's heart hammered in his chest as his turn approached. "Human interface ready," he said, hoping his voice didn't betray him. Vrix nodded solemnly. "Then we begin the activation sequence." The massive chamber hummed with energy as power flowed into the Nexus Annihilator. Lights cascaded across its intricate surface, illuminating alien glyphs and complex circuitry. The air itself seemed to vibrate. "Phase 1 complete," reported a technician, and moving to Phase 2. Jack positioned himself at his designated console, fingers hovering over the controls. This was at the moment his plan would either save Earth or doom them all. Admiral Zorn stepped forward. "Wait," he commanded, his voice cutting through the excitement. "I wish to verify the targeting parameters personally." Jack felt his blood run cold as Zorn approached his station. "Of course, Admiral," Vrix said. "Mr. Holloway, please display the targeting matrix." Jack tapped several commands, bringing up a holographic display of the galaxy. Earth glowed with an ominous red marker. "As you can see," Vrix explained, "the human homeworld has been designated as the first test subject. Once we've confirmed successful dimensional dissolution there, we can proceed with the full deployment." Zorn studied the display, then turned his compound eyes toward Jack. "And you, human? You've accepted this necessity." Jack met the alien's gaze steadily. "I understand that sometimes sacrifices must be made for the greater good." "Indeed," Zorn replied, unconvinced. "Proceed." As the activation sequence continued, Jack waited for his moment. The chamber filled with a high-pitched whine as the Annihilator charged to full capacity. A dimensional targeting locked, called out a technician. Quantum field stabilized, reported another. Preparing for final activation, Vrix announced. Mr. Holloway, please initiate the human chaos protocol. This was it. Jack took a deep breath and entered the final command sequence, not the one they expected, but the one he'd been secretly implementing all day. Protocol initiated, he confirmed. The Nexus Annihilator pulsed with blinding light. The chamber shook violently. Alarms blared as technicians scrambled to make sense of their readings. What's happening? Rex demanded. These energy patterns are not what we predicted. Jack stepped back from his console. I made some adjustments. He sabotaged it. Zorn roared, lunging toward Jack. Stop him. But it was too late. The Annihilator's energy field expanded, enveloping the entire chamber in a rippling curtain of light. Every Voraxian froze in place, their movements slowing to a glacial pace. What have you done? Vrix's words emerged in slow motion. Jack walked calmly through the chamber, untouched by the effect. I didn't disable it, I redirected it. Enter. The Annihilator isn't dissolving dimensions, it's altering time perception. Right now, for every second that passes for me, you're experiencing about a millisecond. He approached the main console and began shutting down systems methodically. By the time you can move normally again, I'll have disabled the weapon, transmitted its specifications to Earth's defense networks, and negotiated a much more equitable peace treaty. Jack continued working as the Voraxians watched in helpless slow motion. See, that's the human chaos factor you couldn't quantify. We don't accept no-win scenarios. We rewrite the rules. Hours later, as the effect finally began to wear off, Jack sat casually in the commander's chair, feet propped on the console, studying a tablet. Admiral Zorn was the first to regain normal movement. This is impossible. Actually, Jack replied, it's diplomacy human style. I've taken the liberty of drafting a new treaty. You'll find it quite reasonable. Earth remains intact, and in exchange we'll share some fascinating human technologies that your scientists haven't even considered. He smiled. Oh, and I've already contacted my superiors. They're very interested in peaceful cooperation with the Voraxian Empire, assuming, of course, that further attacks are off the table. Zorn's mandibles clicked in fury, but Commander Vrix stepped forward. The human has outwitted us. Admiral, perhaps there is wisdom in reconsidering our approach. As the chamber filled with bewildered Voraxians coming back to normal time, Jack couldn't help but think of Miska. The saboteur had been right all along. One more thing, Jack added. I'd like to discuss the immediate release of diplomat Miska. I think you'll find we have a lot in common when it comes to preventing unnecessary destruction. Vrix and Zorn exchanged looks of defeat and grudging respect. Very well, Mr. Holloway, Vrix conceded. It seems we have much to learn about human diplomacy. Jack grinned. Trust me, this is just the beginning.